Good morning, everybody. It's good to see all the familiar names. It's good to see all the other people that I do not necessarily know. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to this exciting event. We are very pleased that you made time to be with us. I'm going to ask that the logistics team help me with starting with the national anthem. If we can all just be silent, mute everything so that we can have a moment of silence through the national anthem. Thank you. Let me start again to everybody and start greeting all of you and welcoming you to an event that belongs to the Central University of Technology Library Information Services, referred to here as CEN, C-E-N. Let's move on to the next one, unveiling the next to the world of the University of the Free State Library Information Services, referred to here as FREE, F-R-E-E. The next slide. And welcome, colleagues, to the world of the Sol Plaatje University Library Information Services, referred to here as SOL, S-O-L. The next slide. And of course, colleagues, welcome to CEN Free Sol Book Fair, our debut, the very first book fair that we are jointly staging. We are excited about this. It's an exciting event of our professional lives. It's a debut that we regard as an achievement. It's an achievement for us because this has been our vision for quite some time. And it makes it even more exciting because it is a joint venture of the three library information services of the three universities that are at the center of our country. We have signed a memorandum of understanding as a three universities, allowing us to share the resources, our expertise, and this is one of the projects that we have agreed to jointly stage annually. This is going to be an annual event, everybody. Over and above our roles as academic libraries contributing towards the success of our institutions' teaching, learning, and research goals, we believe reading, that is being literate, goes a long way in enhancing academic success and lifelong learning of our students. We are not only accommodating our university communities, we are accommodating actually everybody in the Free State, everybody nationally, and we're hoping to grow this internationally as well. We believe creating platforms such as this one with engagements that involve our academics will go a long way in enriching vibrant and engagement in matters of national interest. We have put together a program spanning over 2 days with different themes, such as those written by our authors and poets, tackling areas such as mental health, as October is mental health in South Africa, topics such as dealing with corruption, whistleblowing in our country, white-collar crimes in the form of well-orchestrated mafia, topics that talk about our cultural influences, dealing with life's challenges, African languages, and so on. We also believe that this will go a long way in creating awareness about the awesome books and poems that have been written by the authors and poets, further developing our love for reading and thus buying the books, an act that will contribute towards the economic well-being of our writers. Allow me then to welcome you again and declare the CEN Free Sol Book Fair opened. We have the blessings of our principals, and at this stage, I would like to invite you to listen to the recording of messages of support from our Deputy Vice Chancellors, Professor Corley Vitun from the University of the Free State, Professor Samson Mashele from the Central University of Technology, and Professor Amasa Ndofirepi, who is the acting head of School of Education, who is from the Sol Plaatje University, who have agreed to stand in on behalf of Professor Mary Jean Beckson. The DVCs from the three institutions are responsible for the management of libraries as one of their responsibilities. I would like to ask then our committee to play the messages of support of our DVCs.
I would like to take this opportunity to applaud you on the first launch of the book fair as a partnership project between the University of the Free State, the Central University of Technology, and the Sol Plaatje University. The University of the Free State, as a signatory of the Memorandum of Understanding, celebrates this momentous occasion. We're looking forward to this becoming an annual library event. This launch marks a historic moment in the vision that the library at the UFS had when we conducted our library gap analysis in 2017 as part of the UFS's Integrated Transformation Plan. The external reviewers recommended that we enable closer relationship between the three universities in our central South African region. It is indeed a great honor to witness the launch of the first book fair and the collaboration between the three universities. As the University of the Free State, we've always been on the forefront of contributing toward literacy development of our communities, especially starting school libraries. We encourage reading clubs in collaboration with our stakeholders. We also conduct book launches on a regular basis where we invite authors to share their literary creations in support and encouragement of the culture of reading and innovation. This book fair presents a wonderful opportunity in support of developing a culture and a love for reading in the Free State and the Northern Cape provinces. The book fair creates creative new opportunities for all the relevant libraries to build our book collections. Our university communities will also experience an interaction with authors and poets who have contributed to the current South African dialogue. On behalf of the University of the Free State, I would like to congratulate the UFS, CUT and Sol Plaatjes for developing the book fair to fruition and for contributing towards the culture of the love of reading. Thank you and enjoy this unique and novel opportunity.
Honor for me to welcome you all in the book fair, which is a collaboration of the three universities, the Central University of Technology, the Sol Plaatje University, and the University of the Free State. What can one say about this momentous occasion? Well, one would start by the importance of book. In fact, probably the greatest gift that one can give someone is the love of learning through books. In fact, as they say, the best people in the world have the biggest libraries. Why is that? Because books really appeal to one's intellect. When you read a book, you can travel to other places. In fact, when you read a book and apply what you read in a book, it can actually re-script your whole life. Why is that very important? Because remember, we're facing so many challenges. And of course, with the advent now of the television and the internet, most people do not read. But why is it important to read and to make sure that the next generation reads? This is very much important because when you read, it actually also appeals to your imagination. When you read something, you don't see it. It makes you to be able to imagine things. And that actually assists you with the connections in your brain. And you can be able to think out of the box. Think about the many books that you've read throughout the ages. In my mind, the book that comes to mind are some of the books written by William Shakespeare. In fact, one that comes to mind is Richard III. You remember in one of the scenes, he says, "The world has grown so bad that wrens made prey where eagles dare not perch. Since every jack became a gentleman, there's many a gentle person made a jack." It makes you think to try and unpack what he's trying to say there. In one of the scenes, he says, "This hand which for thy love did kill thy love, shall for thy love kill a far truer love." So one gets to enjoy how other people actually express themselves. And of course, reading books should not be maybe just in English, but also in other languages to promote also other languages. And of course, to go out there to communities to making sure that we encourage the reading of books and making sure that people have got books in their own hands. So as we launch this first book fair in collaboration with the other two institutions, University or Sol Plaatje University and the University of the Free State, I wish you everything of the best. And mine is just to say, keep on reading books and encourage others to also read books. Thank you very much.
Good morning to you all, colleagues. My name is Professor Amasando Firepi, the acting head of School of Education. I am here to provide a message of support from the Sol Plaatje University for this very critical book fair, which draws media and public attention, especially students and faculty, to the book industry. I'm quite aware that this is a meeting point for publishers, agents, distributors, and retailers to do business in the book industry. And once again, this to us is a good platform for authors to meet their public. And we equally find this to be a key stimulant in the publishing industry and a marketplace for trade professionals in the book industry. I therefore strongly support SPU's collaboration with sister institutions in delivering this invaluable service to the scholarship in universities and the public at large. I wish you all the best of luck from Sol Plaatje. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We thank our principals for making time and declaring their support and believing in this worthwhile cause. Colleagues, my name is Betty Easter. I'm the University Librarian at the Central University of Technology. Over and above the opening remarks, I'm also chairing this session. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our keynote speakers. We regard ourselves as being very fortunate to have in our midst two leaders in our profession who have agreed to grace our event with their worthwhile participation, delivering their keynote addresses. The first keynote address will be from Dr. Buhle Mbambotata, who is the University Librarian of the National University of Lesotho. Dr. Mbambotata previously served as the Director, Resources Development of the African Library Information Association and Institutions, AFLIA, which is our association in the continent, and that is from 2017 to 2019. She served as the Executive Director, Library Services at the University of South Africa, and that was from 2006 to 2016. Served as a University Librarian at the University of Zimbabwe from 2001 to 2006. She also served as a Senior Librarian at the University of Botswana way back in 1995 to 2001. Dr. Mbambotata serves as a chair of the Board of Directors of the Council on Library Information Resources and a member of Board of Directors for African Journals Online. She is a former member of the Board of Directors of the National Library of South Africa and served 2 terms as governing board member of IFLA. IFLA is our international association. Dr. Mbambotata is a distinguished librarian whose knowledge and expertise were recognized when she was awarded the IFLA Medal for Distinguished Service to Libraries in Africa. Her excellence in leadership was also recognized at UNISA when she was awarded the UNISA Woman of the Year Award, as well as the Vice Chancellor Award for Distinguished Leadership. Let me hand over to you, Dr. Mbambotata. We're looking forward to your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words. I'm delighted to be here today to be sharing this in this inaugural book fair that my neighbors are hosting. I'm delighted to be part of it and look forward to participating in the future ones. But for this one, your inaugural one, I really wish you well, and I pray that it goes well and it goes beyond your expectations. So I'm delighted to be part of this event. My presentation is going to be largely exploring the reading landscape in South Africa, and a lot of my presentation will be based on the insights I gained while I was on the board of the NLSA and the work that was done to promote reading. So since I'm not moving my screen, I'll keep asking Mbeta to please move to the next screen so I can speak. So my presentation is entitled Towards a Reading Nation, Exploring the Landscape. So what is our context? Please show what is our context? The Book Council in 2015 indicated that only 40% of the South African population reads. I've not been able to get the statistics for the later years, but I think they would have been disrupted by the disruptions of the last 2 years. But it'll be interesting to see what the picture looks like in 2021. Also in the same statistics, it was indicated that 5% of adults, parents, read to their children. In a recent statistics in reading trends, it was indicated that in 2017, while our national literacy rate was 8.7.05%, it had actually declined from 2015. I must say, with this context on readership statistics, I cannot wait to see what it looks like for the last 2 years, considering the disruptions we've had. Another context that speaks to our reading is our historical context. Most of us are first-generation readers in our families. Most of us are products of Bantu education, in which learning was by rote learning, which did not encourage a love for reading. Most of us come from contexts where libraries were scarce in our communities. And so a culture of reading was not automatically created. And a lot of us came from homes where there were no books. And so reading was not our second nature. Another legacy matter is that a lot of us come from an oral culture. If it may be said, if we are not a reading nation, we probably are a singing nation. Because of our oral culture, we sing a lot, we do poetry, and because of our oral culture, we don't tend to read as much. And so this legacy speaks to how do we navigate past the historical disadvantages and our ingrained and our entrenched oral culture that sets us into a position where our preferred mode of communication is by talking. Our preferred mode of socializing is by speaking instead of reading. Next point, please. In order for us to go past those hindrances, we need a book development that's going to help us to improve those statistics, to be able to increase the literacy rate, to be able to get more people reading in order to move past the historical legacies as well as the statistics that I shared in the previous slide. And in order for us to do this, those of us in this part of the region know the saying that says, we need to work together in order to bring the harvest. And there isn't a more appropriate space than in the reading space, that we need a multidisciplinary approach to developing a policy on reading that will help us go past the legacy matters, that will help us to increase those statistics and entrench a reading culture. As the DVC said earlier, reading opens our minds. And if we are going to go past those issues that stand against reading, we need a multi and interdisciplinary approach to policy development. It will take government to work together with NGOs, to get together with education, lower and higher education, our colleagues, the publishers, our booksellers, libraries. Next slide, please. Next point. The reading public urging us to go on. Next point, please. And the last point there was, who else should be part of this structure? Who else should be part of this reading structure? As you can see, it's a multi-sectoral approach, but we may need to invite others who will inform policy, that we may create a good framework on which to develop books and encourage reading and encourage and work on building a reading culture. Next slide, please. Why is reading important? The DVC was really excellent on highlighting why reading is important, why reading is crucial for us. And as librarians, we always say reading gives access to information and knowledge. But to those who write and authors, it increases creativity. Reading improves communication. Reading For us in South Africa, enhances national cohesion as we read about other cultures, as we read about what other nations are saying. It encourages national cohesion. Reading preserves knowledge. From reading, we know things from the past. It enables our minds to explore new ideas, explore possibilities. Reading encourages research. You cannot publish if you have not read. So you need to read, to cite, to research. So reading is important for the development of humanity. Reading is important for stretching our minds. Reading is important for passing on the baton and knowledge to the next generation. Reading builds the nation. For us as Africans, there's a saying that we all hate that says, if you want to hide knowledge from an African, put it in a book. And with this book fair, I cancel that saying, to say that as Africans, we are growing a love for reading, that you may never hide ideas in a book for us, because we will read that book. Next slide, please. So within South Africa, there are many organizations that are working not only to develop policy, but to build an infrastructure and to build the book, because we need a book in order to read. Whether it is a digital book or a printed book or an oral book, we need books in order to read. And so there are many organizations working within South Africa to build a reading culture, to read, to build books, to enable us to read. The first organization is the National Reading Coalition, and you will have seen quite a lot of work they're doing even during the lockdown, encouraging people to read. The National Library of South Africa is mandated by the Act to improve reading in South Africa and eliminate illiteracy. The Publishers Associations, they are working to ensure that materials are published and work against hindrances that prevent publishing. The South African Book Development Council, despite the challenges that they've had, they've been working to promote reading, to promote publishing, and to preservation of the book, and also have been behind the South African Book Week. The Department of Arts and Culture has been another organization that's been working in this space in order to ensure cultural heritage and seeing the book and the passing on the knowledge as an essential cultural heritage. LIASA, our dear organization representing all libraries, has been promoting reading through public libraries and academic libraries and enabling us to ensure that books are available for people to read and to develop a reading culture within the various communities. Next slide, please. As you can see, we have a rich and diverse engagement of bodies and people working together to improve reading. But there are challenges in the reading landscape, and we've got to be honest and face up with those challenges. The first one is, and the DVC touched on this, that we need to ensure the younger generations read. But that speaks to us availing the kind of books that are relevant for younger generations to read. When I was young, my public library depended on donations. And in my public library, I read Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy, and books that did not speak to my locality or to my environment. They spoke about daffodils in autumn in the rolling landscapes of England. But I could not imagine those things because they were not in my locality. And quite often the readings in our public libraries, the easy reading books, do they really speak to the context of the young people? Secondly, many publishers have been speaking about the challenge of viability of publishing within South Africa. If they publish, will there be enough takers? And that has unfortunately seen many publishers go under or close shop because of lack of viability in publishing. We have the challenge of that there's very few materials in local languages. research has shown that young people will learn quickly if they learn in their languages, if they read in their languages. But we are met, on the other hand, with a dearth of knowledge and reading materials in the local languages. As we go into the digital landscape in which we are, many young people prefer to read online, but there is a dearth of relevant, engaging digital content that our young people can read. Finally, the absence of policy, and I know that various institutions have been working on developing a national policy on book development and reading, and the absence of that means that resources are limited, working together is not entrenched, and we don't have a legal framework to promote the development of the book. And those are the challenges that face our landscape. But despite that, there's been a number of inspiring reading initiatives that have started. Next slide, please. And those reading initiatives, next slide, please. Those reading initiatives help to inspire and entrench the reading culture. Please, if you could go to the next slide, Nambita. And next slide, please. The first one is led by the president himself. We start at the top. The president's reading circle champions reading, and the president calls on us to be a nation that experiences the joy of reading. And he leads by example when he does the virtual reading series during COVID and during this season where we are physically distancing, and he reads a portion from the book. And we can connect with the president from his website during this virtual reading. So the leadership that is encouraging reading for us in South Africa is really starting at the top, and we appreciate that. Go on to the next slide, please. The next slide, if you can just go back once. The next slide speaks to digital initiatives that have been bringing reading content to young people on digital devices. And this is a deliberate effort by several NGOs to bring the next generation on board by providing ebooks, mobile reading from mobile phones, and also enabling reading on mobile phones in local languages. Creation of digital content is a crucial multi-stakeholder engagement that's important for engaging the next generation and enabling them to read in an environment in which they are careful. And in the next slide, I share examples of organizations that are doing that. And these are just a few that I have shown. The Center for the Book in Cape Town has been piloting this with a number of publishers. Nali Bali does this also, including reading in stories that young people have created themselves in isiXhosa and in English. Funza is also a book in which young people write and publish digital book. World Reader is an international organization that does some work in South Africa and in a number of African countries in which digital reading and reading from ebooks is encouraged. And in these spaces, a new excitement for reading is encouraged in young people as they find content that is relevant to them, but also presented in the spaces in which they are familiar. Next slide, please. The National Library of South Africa really does a lot of work to inspire reading and create a reading framework as it is mandated by the Act of Parliament. In 2021, they led the National Reading Summit. They have a number of children's reading programs. They also have a community publishing program and promote publishing and publishing programs, as well as the reprint of African classics that has seen many books that we used to read when we were growing up reprinted and made available in order that we may find relevant materials for us to read. And so going into the future, what do we have to do to entrench a reading habit? What is a framework that we could create and agree on that will help us to create a reading nation? And the next slides highlight 5 points that the National Reading Summit pointed out as essential key components that we need to build on in the next few years in order to build a reading landscape within South Africa. And so the outcomes of the National Reading Summit pointed out 5 communities of practice. And the first one is reading programs that are geared for the youth. This is so important because the next generation needs to learn to read and learn to enjoy reading, because they have so much competition from television, from films, from texts and other things that take away from reading. So the summit said one of the first things to do is to have programs nationally that promote reading amongst youth. The second community of practice was one to promote reading amongst people living with disabilities and have special needs. This is a group that's often neglected. And so it is important that the reading framework includes deliberately focusing on people that are living with disabilities, print disabilities in whatever form they come. A third community of practice was to deliberately focus on minimizing barriers to reading, be these policy, be they some of the challenges that are highlighted earlier, be they areas in which are related to technology, whatever they are, removing those barriers to reading. A fourth community of practice was encouraging us to tell our stories in order that we may increase reading in our languages and make reading interesting as people are able to read in their own mother tongues. And the fourth one was to use the fourth industrial revolution and AI in order to speed and scale production of reading materials. And this leaves us with a challenge that when we go to the next reading summit, how much of these will we have implemented? And I challenge us during this book fair to perhaps refer to these 5 communities of practice and look for ways of collaborating, of merging activities, of working together in order that we pick one that we may promote. Which community of practice are we going to promote as a Free State in order to entrench reading in the Free State area? Next slide, please, which brings me to my conclusion. So as I come to my conclusion, I'd like us to, as we think about entrenching a reading habit and creating a reading nation, that we keep the next generation in mind, that we keep writing and publishing and reading programs for young people so that we can entrench the reading habit, not only with easy reading books, but even with academic books, and encouraging young people to read for pleasure, for learning, but to read. Secondly, as I conclude, it is incumbent for the government to provide a legal framework for reading and development. I believe that the 4 community of practice that the National Reading Summit, led by the National Library of South Africa and the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, that it will enable government to create a legal framework for reading development in order that South Africa may promote reading to the next generation. As I've indicated in this slide, in order to create a reading nation, it is crucial that there's collaboration amongst many role players. This is not an area in which there should be protection of turf, but rather it is an area in which barriers should be broken so that people work together to develop the book, to develop reading, to develop a reading culture. Because building a reading culture is a future imperative. If our next generation does not read, if our next generation does not engage with the book, the next generation will be lost. It is therefore imperative that a culture of reading is encouraged. And finally, a reading nation is a thriving nation, it has been said. And I trust that South Africa wants to continue being a thriving nation. In order to do that, reading must remain central, and building a reading culture should remain central to everything that we do as librarians, that we do as part of the building of the book infrastructure and part of the creation of a reading culture. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you well with the book fair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Buhle, Dr. Mbambotata, for setting the scene, bringing the much needed context to this event. I knew you'd make it at this very short notice when I talked to you and asked you to be part of this, and you said, "Oh, Betsy, this is short notice," but I knew you'd make it. And thank you so much. So, colleagues, we're not going to engage with our keynote speaker. I'm just going to remind you quickly about the key points that she has talked about. She made us aware about the hindrances to reading, that reading is not our second nature. We also have that oral tradition that we've always had that is also a bit of a challenge. We are used to speaking it, not necessarily reading. And thank you, Buhle, for reminding us about why reading is important. Thanks for reminding us that reading is important in everything that we do. And yes, we have to cancel that negative saying that says if you want to hide money, if you want to hide treasure from us, hide it in a book, hide it in a library. We have to cancel that misconception. And we noted that you are encouraging us that we need to work together. So the collaborations that you have mentioned, the offices that are playing different roles towards creating this reading nation, we've noted that they will be our future collaborators as well. We are going to make sure that going into the future, we make note of the communities of practice that we have mentioned, and yes, choose one and run with that. This is our own circle of influence. So if this book fair is going to contribute towards the reading nation through choosing one of those, or even all of them, who knows, communities of practice, if we come together, this we can do, and yes, it is doable. So thank you so much, Buhle. I don't have words enough to express my appreciation for being part of us. Thank you so much. Colleagues, you can send your comments on the chat box. If you want to say something to Buhle, you're more than welcome to do that. And with that, then I'm going to introduce our second keynote address, which will be from Dr. Siphiwe Mahala, who is an accomplished short story writer, a novelist, playwright, and literary scholar, playing his trade in English and isiXhosa. He is the author of the following books: When a Man Cries, written in 2007, Yakali Ndoda, written in 2010, African Delights, written in 2011, The House of Truths, 2017, and Red Apple Dreams and Other Stories, written in 2019. He is the founder and editor of Imbiza Journal for African Writing. His latest book, can temper the making and breaking of the intellectual tsotsi, which is going to be published in 2022. It's an appendage of his PhD thesis, which he graduated from UNISA in 2018. He has held research and teaching positions at the University of Johannesburg, University of Pretoria, and University of the Witwatersrand. He served as the head of books and publishing at the National Department of Arts and Culture for a period of over 10 years. And with that, then I'm going to ask Dr. Mahala to take us through what he has prepared for us. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Program Director. For some reason, I can't switch on the camera.
All right, we understand. I think you can go ahead as long as we can hear you. That is the most important part.
Okay, thank you. I will also keep trying. I'm not sure what is wrong. Thank you for the opportunity. And well, I must point out, first of all, that the program says I'm with the Department of Arts and Culture. I'm no longer with the department, as we heard in the introduction. I'm the editor of Imbiza Journal for African Writing. Thank you for inviting me to this inaugural CEN Free Sol Book Festival, which I think is a very important initiative in our efforts to promote a culture of reading and also entrench the importance of books in our lives. I've been requested to reflect on my lifelong journey with books. And this is the journey in which libraries have played a very central role. Because in many ways, books saved my life. By way of background, I was born and raised in Makhanda, Eastern Cape, a small town where there's barely anything happening except for the arts. That is, we're known for the National Arts Festival and the schools, which include the university, Rhodes University. So it is through those institutions that I was fortunate enough to be exposed to books because my father worked at what we call now the former Model C schools. And well, as a librarian, not as a teacher. And he would bring books home. And it was through those books that I was introduced to reading. And this saved my life in so many ways. But what many people could relate to is that you would recall some of us would recall that in the 1980s, there was a period in which schools had to be closed. Okay, there's a distracting sound. I'm not sure who hasn't muted. Okay, that has stopped. Thank you. So saying in the 1980s, there was a period where there were school boycotts, during the state of emergency, where as a teenager, I had to find myself in the township for 2 years, not going to school. And we were exposed to so many things, which led many spend time languishing in prison or never able to go back to school again. But what kept me going during that period was the fact that I had access to books. So books were my companions at the time. And so with everything that was going on, I found refuge in books. So books introduced me to worlds beyond my immediate existence. However, one can have so many books in a household. What really made a difference to me was an encounter with a library, something that I've shared before, that one day we were attending and going to the community hall to watch a movie, what we called Bioscope at the time. And, you know, we were invited to a smaller room next to the community hall, and where we were shown a film for free. And at that point, that's when I knew that that smaller room was a library. It had books, and I was so fascinated to find out that you can be given books to take home with. So I was introduced to books to library use by accident. And this brings me now to the current situation that libraries in communities, in schools, and in institutions of higher learning. One, I think we need to encourage people to use the material in the libraries more and more. For instance, we have here a collaboration between 3 institutions. Now, being institutions of higher learning means your focus is to encourage people to read, encourage people to make use of books at that level. However, reading is a lifelong experience. In other words, we need to encourage reading from an early age, as early as possible. Preferably, actually, some mothers read to their children before they are born. And this is the kind of practice that we need to encourage. We need to encourage the use of books, the use of library material at a very early age. Imagine how it would be like, for instance, to link up with the Department of Health, so that when mothers take their children to the clinics, when a child turns 1 or anything like that, they are gifted with a children's book. That when a child turns 3, they are gifted with a library card. Because where communities, there are community libraries, we are clear about, you know, the architecture, the makeup of that particular community. And if we were to be able to introduce children to books even before they start schooling, that would give them an exposure to books, to appreciate books, and to start reading as a form of or rather not to read books as a chore because they have to do so in order to pass an exam. Books should become, or reading should become, a pastime, something that you do for fun, for enjoyment. That could actually address one of the challenges that we are talking about, that you know, where you find learners reading only because they have to pass an exam, only because they have to meet they have to be able to do the homework or anything like that. So this is part of what we are trying to do as Imbiza. When we talk about reading, when we promote reading, we start from an early age where we have children's books. We encourage writing of youth literature, and we encourage academia. And again, when we talk about academia, as I say, this is a value chain that we need to be familiarize ourselves with. We need to be aware of the ecosystem, because it will remain difficult to promote reading for as long as library sector itself is not professionalized. In other words, there ought to be a relationship, synergies between the institutions and community libraries, so that communities that are fortunate enough to have libraries should be managed by qualified librarians. What we've seen in some of the communities is that libraries would just be there as a form of job creation, where anybody can just find a job and work with no background, with no training in the sector. So I think this is one of the things that we need to focus on, professionalizing the library sector. Further to that, I'm glad that this program involves a number of writers who write in indigenous African languages. In South Africa, we have 11 official languages. However, over the years, it's been a real struggle to find platforms that embrace writers or books in indigenous languages. And I think a platform of this nature is really helpful in sort of embracing our diversity linguistically, and also creating the synergies between reading promotion and library sector, because most of the time you find that these two don't necessarily go hand in hand the way they have been handled in the past. But in any case, the point I'm getting to now is that if you have trained librarians, they would understand the importance of libraries in giving access to books to the communities that they serve. So access to books also means that you need to stock books first that are written by writers of that country, writers who articulate the history, the culture, and the conditions of the people that you serve. But also, there needs to be a special focus in the languages spoken by the surrounding communities. In this way, we would ensure that our books speak directly to the communities that are served by these libraries. And lastly, I think these three institutions have done something wonderful in terms of collaborating. I have written in the past about the trend that we have seen where book fairs tend to go for the easy routes. In other words, they have been focused in the big cities, particularly Cape Town and Johannesburg. And these are communities which, in any case, are more privileged compared to rural provinces and central areas like the ones served by this book fair. So it is the first thing to ensure that we spread out as much as possible, try and serve the underprivileged communities. And to me, that is how we can build a thriving nation, where people in the rural areas, in the marginalized communities, are given access to books. And we always needed a point of convergence, because it really doesn't help to have small initiatives that do not have no relationship with other initiatives out there. So a collaboration of this nature ensures that there is a point of convergence for librarians, for writers, and for book lovers in general. And this is something that we need as the reading community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahala. Thank you for that insightful knowledge, experiences that you have shared with us. We note as well that you are actually the editor of the Imbiza Journal of African Writing. We have developed the love for contributing to knowledge through research, so we will be making use of your journal to publish our stories. So that's another collaboration that we are looking forward to. Thank you for showing us that books can save someone's life. You have mentioned that reading has definitely saved your life, and thank you for discovering that small library that has made a difference in your life. Yes, we acknowledge that even though our niche at the moment is more on an academic level, we will be reaching out as the years go by to the other community members in the whole of South Africa. We do acknowledge that reading has to start from an early age. There is a saying in Setswana that says, "Le ojwa, le sale metsi." We agree. We have to mold, we have to shape our children's reading habits right from an early age. And so the collaboration that we'll have with everybody else who are closer to all the age levels of the community, we will make sure that this platform works for all of us. We will make sure that we instill the love of reading from an early age. We believe that's the case. That should be the case. And of course, we make mention that it's important for us to be librarians who are impactful in what we do. This profession should not only about job creation. Yes, job creation still contributes towards South Africa as a whole, but when you are employed, then you should be making an impact in the community and therefore contributing towards the love for reading as one of your responsibilities. And so the importance of appointing qualified librarians is very key. We have an association, you probably know about it, LIASA, it is SAQA accredited association. So we are professional librarians. It's a matter of making sure that we do have enough people who are qualified, who can be appointed in those positions and make then a difference. We agree that it's all in our hands. Thank you then with those words, Dr. Mahala. Making time and with us. Please always make use of the channels to engage with Dr. Mahala. Please, just a reminder, always make sure that you check your mic and mute so that we do not have any further disturbances. We are not doing very well in terms of time, but you'll agree with me that it is worthwhile for us to spend time and listen to what the participants have prepared for us. And so at this stage, we will be having the poetry session, poetry recitals. It's about people who have the art of playing with words, people with impeccable memory that they use to recite their stories, their observations, their teachings. And so for today, we will have 4 poetry recitals. 3 are supposed to be live recitals with 1 that has been recorded. And so at this stage, I'm going to hand over to our committee members who will be assisting us with the 4 recitals before we take a short break. Over to you.
gobane se go tladile sediba ka go biloga mola metsi o sa polofetše ke re tate nna morwedi ya gago wa ntlhokiša le ya leširiningato wa kgetha ka go lokologanya dikgato wa tsoga ka ona bokgwa le mafato morago wa sekgerule tate go be go le boima tate go gola ke natetšwa ka mašela go ga gola go tšwa kubong ya tsonkana go gola ke phula dithotse mašego le masegare ke lalela ka bogobe jwa go patwa ka letswai mare ya gana go feta bogolong tate o lekane gobane beno ba itšhatšha tša maphušana ba ipotsa gore bona ba fapana le dikgato tša lerutu tate ke be ke kgona go ba bona gobane re bona ba agelane ka lerutu.
Thank you.
Go be go le boima tate go be go le boima ke sa gopola le ka mohla ka geno tate ba hlabile kgomo tše 3 ka ona modiro wa modimo tate go be go le boima gobane rena baagelane ba mebotho ga se ke rala letšwa tate re kwetse ka kgomana ralala le dilete go thetha le mebotho go fitlha ka ge o etla go potama sekerong sa nko tša rena tate go be go le boima gobaneteommago a re seleka ka megolokwane ya basadi a tšhankgetše ka methulgana ya setšo ka matsogo a go tlalelana maseka a re basane go šate wa dua basane go šate wa lona tate o be o le kae gobane sa go tshelega go gore baagelwane ka moka ga bona ba be ba laleditšwe tate ke re ba merafe ka moka rena baagelane ba go lebana ka difero le mepoto tate re ile ra tshedišwa maahlo go le boima tate go be go le boima le ka mohla tate ka bona ditlogolo le ditlogolwana di biletšwa ka mafuri jaane ge le bua di a botoga dipheta di dutše melaleng tate go be go le boima ke re le megogo ile a hloka mekgoko tate go be go le boima o be o ile kae tate o be o ile kae ka mohla mmago a nkorola phatla ka lehlotlo a mpotša ge e le gore nna ke tlogolo sa batho tate ke be ke se ka iša tshele ka geno ke be ke ile go ba tsošetša gobane mme o ile mpotša sephiri se segolo gore beno ke madietso tate ke be ke se ka iša tshele ka sefapane sa morena ke be ke sa tsebe ge e le gore ke tla kopana le dipela le kgoluga ke be ke sa tsebe ge e le gore ke tla fetša tau išetšitše mafatlana tate mmao ya mpotša ge e le gore ka tla fafatla le go gapa nkwe a re tate o be go lekane gobane lefelofa ke bolela ka yena mmago wa tlhokofeleng koo yena yo wa go tlhamokela malebitšeng ke go kudi ya phoko yena yo go thwe go nna ke mmitše magolo yena yo go thwe go nna nae tamogetša le seila le leina tate o be o lekane gobane ke sa gopola tate ke sa gopola mmago a garile diroko a dikgotlakgotla phatla ka go nona mpotša ge e le gore nna ga ke tlhogolo sa gane ke re tate tšatši le gore a tshwetse togothoko ya mabe seatlene a ikana ka badimo ba go bankotša mafako a re nna ga ke setlogolo sa gane.
All right, unfortunately, I can't share my screen, so I'll just go ahead and read it myself. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Jane. I'm a first-year BA student at Sol Plaatje University, and I'll be reading my piece, The Street Sweeper. Driving home from work on a crisp afternoon, another fabricated story, another book bruised to try and hide. Having bared my soul to those with vicious tongues and thoughts, always wanting more blood. Don't they know you cannot suck blood out of a stone? This is my daily life in the city I call home, Johannesburg, with its bustling streets, taxis hooting, hustling to get commuters to another place. probably a township out of town, but no one cares, as long as they return to work tomorrow. Sewage flows freely down the streets, ending its journey in the stormwater drains, overflowing with feces, litter, and broken promises. The stench permeates my mind. I'm jolted awake by the piercing screams of a woman being raped, her dignity ripped from between her blood-stained thighs. Her children are forced to go to work, their offices situated at the Broken Robots, corner of Jan Smuts and Empire Road. Begging with a little McDonald's cup for money, food, or maybe something better. Shouldn't these helpless children be in school? What have we done? I'm jolted awake. It is not like this in the suburbs. The manicured, mint-colored lawns lazily stretch out under the jacaranda trees, with their fragile purple petals crushed and dirtied underfoot. The houses, like monsters, rise, holding their occupants hostage and protecting their lives of a perfect life, guarded by 6-foot grey walls, electric fences, and blood-hungry dogs. Behind these walls, women bleed, babies cry, trembling with suffocating fear. The blaring of the smart TV deafens the sound of a crystal glass shattering into tiny fragments on the marble floor, later to be swept under the carpet, and the sound of sweet alcohol being poured. I'm jolted awake with the taste of blood in my mouth, searing pain in the crevices of my arms, legs, and where my dignity used to be. Sensing the bruises before I see them, bruises colored in dramatic black and purple, transforming magically into the distorted color wheels, green and yellow shade. They never go away. They replenish daily by housekeeping. I'm jolted awake by the stench of my own reality. Is there freedom from the fires of my hell? I didn't think so. I'm jolted awake by the street sweeper as he sweeps the dirt, stench, deceit, and flesh into the overflowing stormwater drain. This is my life in the middle-class suburbs of Johannesburg. Did everyone hear me?
All right. That then takes care of the end of our session 1. We will take a short break, 10 minutes break. Thank you so much to our poets. We really enjoyed sharing beautiful words with us, your stories. You guys are talented, I tell you that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The podium is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the second session of our CEN Free Soul book fair. An exciting moment. This is we really are very, very excited. And so far, everything that we have just listened to has been breathtaking. I even had, goosebumps listening to Dr. Mbambotata Bushle and Dr. Mahala. As for the poems, the recitals, they just revived something in me, and I'm like, this is just a wonderful moment to live on. So my name is Jeanette Molopiani. I'm going to chair this second session. The theme of the session is Africanedom, wealth, monopoly, and cultural influence. So in this session, we are going to have a discussion, the Stellenbosch Mafia by Mr. Peter du Toit. This book has trended a while last year. It was just everywhere. Everybody was just raving and talking about it. And I got the opportunity just to get a snippet out of, what the book really entails. And I found this, to be really something to explore, especially during December holidays. I'm definitely going to read all these books in our December holidays. Now about Mr. Peter du Toit. He was a Stellenbosch and Kommer. I hope I said it correctly, Ngomer, during high school. And he's an award-winning journalist and assistant editor at News 24. He has written about politics for a decade and a half and is the co-author of Enemy of the People, published by Jonathan Ball in 2017. He is a former editor of HuffPost, South Africa, and news editor of Beeld and Netwerk 24. So we are going to listen to the recording of the book, and then we have our panelists who are going to unpack this book and its context so that it makes sense to us. Remember, this book fair is for the region, is for the country. So everybody is going to get, those who didn't get the opportunity to attend the launch now have an opportunity in this book fair to get the details of what the book really entails, especially all the book lovers and all the people who do not have access to reading material. This is just a wonderful opportunity. So our panel discussion, the panelists will be Mr. Zbu Dlamini, a lecturer from CUT, and then we also have Dr. Alfred Mudise. He's also from the Central University of Technology, Free State. So what I'm going to request now is that the recording of the book is the book is played, and then we can yes, somebody needs to mute. Right, and then we can then engage with the book. Thank you very much. Over to you, organizers.
Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me? Sure.
Yes.
Yes, good morning, colleagues, and all the organizers and people who are in this platform. I'm together with my colleague there.
Mr. Peter Dutoy, welcome to the first Central University of Technology, University of the Free State, and Sol Plaatje University, known as the CEN Free Soil 2021 Book Fair. It is an honor to have you. We appreciate your time.
So much. Thanks, Sabu. It's wonderful to be with you. It's a privilege to be part of the first one. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I think it's wonderful. Any festival which encourages reading, I'm a big supporter of.
Thank you. With me, I have Peter, the one and only author of the #1 bestseller, capturing and an enormously researched book titled, wait for it, The Stellenbosch Mafia Inside the Billionaires Club, which was first published in July 2019. This book has a link in economics, social, political, and sociological economic history dynamics and context all in one. The book has, you will see the book, it will be displayed. The book has Johann Rupert, pardon my mispronunciations, Christo, Vise, Marcus, and Whitney Basson on the cover page. Peter, not to worry, I will not ask you about the interlinks between the Stellenbosch Mafia and political elites. It is beyond the scope of our discussion.
You can ask me anything.
Not a problem. So, Peter, you have also published, correct me here, you will correct me here, ne? You have also published or was involved with Practical Guide to Reading, Thinking and Writing Skills in 1995, Enemy of the People in 2017, and was also involved with South Africa Beyond COVID-19 Trends, Change and Recovery in May 2020. In May 2020. So Peter, I saw that you were, Peter, I saw that you were involved with 8 books in total. So can you confirm if it was you or it was the same person with your name?
Some of them sounds like someone else. The one in 1995 definitely wasn't me. Very much at school back then, so that wasn't me. But I was co-author of Enemy of the People, how Jacob Zuma stole South Africa and how the country fought back with a friend and colleague of mine, Son, who's the editor of News 24. Okay. And then I was editor of a compilation of essays around COVID-19, which came out last year. So it's around 3 books that I've been involved in. Yes.
Oh, only 3. Okay. Thank you for that clarity, because I was like, oh, this man. Well done to you.
Thank you.
And we've also mentioned, so guys, you heard it. It's 3 books. He was involved with 3 published books. I feel like there is more from where this came from. Are you sure it's just 3?
Just 3 for now, but you know, once you start writing, it's such a privilege to be able to write, and it's so rewarding to see your words in print that it's definitely not the last one. I'll definitely continue writing as long as I can.
We will be waiting, my man. We will be waiting for sure. So also, you are a prominent award-winning journalist and assistant editor for News 24 as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. I work at News 24, where I've got the privilege to look after News 24's investigations team, which is a group of very talented, smart journalists who try to catch out crooks and corruptors and state captures. So it's a wonderful job, journalism. I've been in journalism for, I think, almost 18 years now, more than 18 years, almost 19 years. Okay. And it's about watching the country's story unfold. And you know, we take the position as journalists at News 24 very seriously, because it's you know, we are the ones that write the first draft of history, and it's an important. It's something that we take very seriously.
Oh, talk about a man of multiple talents. Great achievements there. We are proud of you as a South African, our very own. So, Peter, since 2019, since the first publication of the Stellenbosch Mafia, you have spoken a lot and given insight about the concept of this book and reviewed the literature of your work. So today, our discussion will not be based more on what you have already shared, because I saw that you have done a great job talking about your product, and that was good. Just for the overview of this book, can you talk to someone who has not heard of or read your book? Just from the horse's mouth, how would you summarize your book in a nutshell, but also leaving us enough impetus to go and get ourselves a copy?
Well, I hope everyone goes and gets a copy. Look, it's the book's title is the Stellenbosch Mafia Inside the Billionaires Club, and it does revolve around. Initially, it revolves around a group of businessmen in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, powerful businessmen, heads of some of the country's biggest, most influential and richest companies. And these individuals, in their own right, are also extremely wealthy. And the term Stellenbosch Mafia is something that over the last couple of years has become almost a political term. It was used during the height of state capture. Julius Malema is a big fan of attacking the Stellenbosch Mafia. And you'd remember the Bell Pottinger PR company that did so much damage to the country when it intervened in our national discourse also used the term Stellenbosch Mafia. So it is about trying to identify who the Stellenbosch Mafia is, who the members are, what is their influence in the country, how far does their influence stretch, and you mentioned social and social history and national and the history of the country earlier. It also revolves around the history of the country. You know, these are white Afrikaans businessmen. You know, so the question needs to be asked: how did they grow to be so wealthy? What did they do to become so rich, and what did they do to build up these big companies? So it was immensely enjoyable to research, to write. And so that's generally, that's in a nutshell what it's about. You know, who are the members of the Stellenbosch Mafia?
Yeah.
Are they evil? You know, do they influence the country in a negative way?
Yeah.
And how did they become so rich?
So people, you heard it. Go out there, go find out how can we revive our economy, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic. We might identify the gaps. So guys, please go out there, go get yourself a copy. So I see a fresh new book was published in March 2021, still the Stellenbosch Mafia. Is there a difference in context with the one published in July 2019?
So we published, or the publishers rather, Jonathan Ball Publishers, published a B format with extra information that has come to light since the book was published, and also material that I didn't use initially. The book, a strong focus of the book obviously is Johan Rupert, who is depends on what the status of the rand is. He might be the second or the first richest man or most richest man in the country. Depends on the rand dollar exchange rate. There's a lot more information around him and his company in the book. So the gist and the general thrust of the book remains the same, but the yellow version, there's a red one and a yellow one.
Yes,
the yellow one
yes.
does have a little bit more information than the red one.
So I hear we should, for our benefit, we should get both the 2019 and the 2021 copy. Am I right?
You could just get the last one. The last one has got everything that the red one has and more. So the yellow one is the one you want.
Okay, so we are going for March 2021 publication, the B format.
Yes, exactly.
We are rushing. We are rushing. So during your interviews in 2019, you already spoke of the setting of your book, like why the Stellenbosch. Would you say that Mr. Julius Malema contributed to or influenced the title of your book in any way?
I don't think he influenced the title. There was a lot of criticism on the title, especially from people in Stellenbosch who live there, people who are close to the people who are on the cover of the book. You know, their friends were very critical of the title that I chose, or that the publishers and I chose. And the publishers, you know, we chose that title and decided on that title because in 2017, 16, 17, 18, the Stellenbosch Mafia was a topic that people spoke about, especially on social media. There was a lot of question marks around what the Stellenbosch Mafia's influence on the economy was. You know, Julius Malema, for example, viciously attacked and at various points attacked the Stellenbosch Mafia because they were supposedly controlling Cyril Ramaphosa. You know, Julius repeatedly said that the Stellenbosch Mafia controls the country. Now, of course, Julius Malema did not coin the phrase. He did not think up the phrase. It was not his creation. The phrase Stellenbosch Mafia, as far as I could ascertain, was first used in 2002. And it was used by a financial journalist in a joking manner when they spoke of a group of businessmen who all made their money in Johannesburg almost, and then just moved down to Stellenbosch. You had Yanni Maton from PSG, you had the guys from Capitec, the bank. Obviously, Mediclinic was already there. The Remgro, the Rupert's company was already there. So a number of big South African companies relocated to Stellenbosch with their CEOs and the big executives just moving there. So financial journalists jokingly referred to the Stellenbosch Mafia. So it didn't used to have a negative connotation. But during state capture, it was used as a political term. It was used to attack opponents, and you know, we thought that that's an interesting story to tell. Are they evil? I don't think so. Are they criminal? I could find no evidence of that. So it was a South African story to tell with some history and politics mixed into it, as all our books are, isn't it? Everything has some history and politics.
Yes, it does. So would you say the negativity towards the title is associated with Stellenbosch Mafia the term Stellenbosch Mafia being the worst example of white monopoly capital.
So that's interesting. Are they the worst example of white monopoly capital? Look, white monopoly capital inherently is a political term because it does denote, it does have a negative connotation to capitalism, which we know is a political system that carries with it enormous inherent problems for a socialized world, but which has over the years and over decades and hundreds of years, well, tens of decades, a number of decades, been shown to be the system amongst a host of bad systems, which probably has the most potential to create the most wealth for the most people. And WMC, white monopoly capital, was also a political term that was weaponized and politicized during the height of state capture. You must remember that especially the media, civil society back then was revealing quite a lot around the corruption involving the ANC government, the corruption involving Jacob Zuma. And they needed something to counter that. They needed something to draw the attention away from state capture. And with the help of Bell Pottinger, WMC and the Stellenbosch Mafia became terms which they used to draw the attention away from their own criminality. So there is a debate to be had about white monopoly capital, about monopoly capital. In this context, though, it was used as a political attack term. The criticism from Stellenbosch was, mafia, the word mafia is related to Italian gangs, is related to criminality. And they were upset that I and my publishers linked them to criminality, which wasn't the case. As I explained earlier, the term Stellenbosch Mafia first originated in 2002 among financial journalists when they referred to this group of businessmen. It was only later that it was weaponized. So the etymology of the word is quite interesting. The way that these words are used are fascinating. But I think, when you read the book, it's an analysis, and it's a colorful story of business and of wealth creation, and the fact that these people often share deep bonds through school and university, which I think was very interesting.
Yeah. Wow, that's a handful there, and it seems like it was not only nationally. When it comes to mafia, other people were involved as well, just by the term mafia. That is interesting. That is interesting. So, who was your ideal target audience before you started writing the Stellenbosch Mafia?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it, Sabu. My target market wasn't people in Stellenbosch. My target market wasn't the well-heeled and well-to-do white Afrikaans speaking people, whether they're in Stellenbosch or in Gauteng or anywhere else. I think my target market was exactly someone who looks like you. I think my target market, and it was a wonderful experience. I wanted to write it for a black audience. I wanted to write it for a black audience who wanted to understand a part of the country's history, which at the time of publication was something that people were speaking about. The white Afrikaans-speaking people in Stellenbosch, because not a lot of what I wrote in the book would have been a surprise to them. And when I wrote the book, at the back of my mind, I did have black South Africans in mind. I did have South Africans in mind, probably from Gauteng. I live in Johannesburg, so black Johannesburg inhabitants, fellow Joburgers who suffer under Eskom at the moment, who I thought would be interested to get a glimpse into a part of history that they might not necessarily have had a glimpse into, because at the time of publication, the term Stellenbosch Mafia was very much something that people were speaking about, and amongst the black intelligentsia and amongst black Twitter, it was certainly a topic. And I thought, look, I am from Stellenbosch. I know the town very well. I went to school at university there. I do have some insights. Let's try to write an entertaining and accessible and a readable book. It's no use that you write a book that's, and I know you're an academic, but you know, heavily academic, and then you don't get a mass market for it. So I did have Black people in mind, and I did have in mind, because I think, you know, the more that we understand of each other's culture and history and background in this country, the better for us all. So that was the market that I had in mind, Sabu. I had someone like you in mind, someone who might be interested in that strand of history. And it, you know, it's not a very demanding book. I think it's not a very heavy book. It's something that I wanted to be accessible to everyone. And as I said earlier, before we got cut off, one of the wonderful experiences of this book was the fantastic reception and reaction that I got from Black readers, Black South Africans who wanted to know more. You know, I got so many goodwill and messages from people saying, look, explain to us how you create wealth. How do you create intergenerational? How can you secure wealth so that your children might have it easier than you had?
The legacy,
what did these people do? So it's been quite a fantastic journey, and you know, I've gotten a lot of brickbats and criticism from Stellenbosch, but a lot of interest and kind words from Johannesburg, and I think that means the book was a success.
So when you spoke about having to understand each other's culture, you took me back to the Black Lives Matter movement, because I mean, if you do not know what is happening, it's not easy to reflect on anything, and you wouldn't know how to react or respond thereon. So I'm glad that you touched on that we, Black, white, we need to understand we need to know each other's culture so that we understand each other.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we've got such a complicated history in this country. Everyone approaches history from a different vantage point. Everyone approaches history from a different angle and from a different point of emphasis. And I, you know, and it makes for a very rich country. You know, there's, you know, you can take any subject imaginable, and there will be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 books written about it, people from different points of view. And the only way in which we can attempt, because I don't think we'll ever have a broad understanding of our true history, but any way to attempt to do it means that we need to delve into history as far as we can. And look, the book is also about history. It's also about the role of Stellenbosch in Afrikaner nationalism, in the rise of Afrikaner nationalism, the rise of the National Party. You know, the Anton Rupert, Johan Rupert's father, who was a much respected businessman. You know, I do write in the book that he was a project of Afrikaner nationalism, because you know what the one thing that I don't know how many of the viewers know this, but in the 1930s, early 1940s, Afrikaners had less than, I think, 2% of the economy was controlled by Afrikaners. They were in fact distrustful of the system of capitalism. And the South African Communist Party made strong inroads into amongst Afrikaners because they simply didn't trust capitalism or the banks. And by 1948, the nationalists wanted to get hold or wanted to control a larger part of the economy, much like many Black people in the country feel today, that they feel outside of the economy and they feel they want to control more of the economy. So what the nationalists did was, you know, they pushed someone like Anton Rupert, and he was a project of Afrikaner nationalism. So it's part history, social history, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. There are a lot of parallels between Black economic empowerment and what was done in the 1930s and 40s. And that's also a story that I wanted to tell.
Yeah, that's yeah. Now let's just proceed. Let's just proceed. So would you say your target audience changed during the writing process in any way?
No, I don't think so. I was very clear from the beginning that this is not a book that I'm writing to be popular amongst people who purport to be part of the Stellenbosch Mafia, nor was it an attempt to ingratiate myself with friends in Stellenbosch and acquaintances in Stellenbosch. So I never wrote it for Stellenbosch. I think I was pretty clear from the beginning that it's a book and a story that I want told so that that Black South Africans in Joburg, where I live, could have an idea of where the Stellenbosch Mafia comes from, what role Stellenbosch played in history, and how Afrikaner businessmen built themselves up into the force in the economy that they are today. So it was about, you know, it was a fascinating project for me to do, but it was also about trying to give Black South Africans an insight into something that I had access to.
Yes, because you also had an idea on how to approach the whole project, as opposed to someone else who has never been exposed to such.
Yes, absolutely. Look, it's a massive project to write. Any author will tell you it's something that looms ahead of you like an enormous, insurmountable mountain. But yes, I was uniquely placed. I knew the town very well, having grown up there. I knew obviously many of the characters that I write about. And being a working journalist, you know, you do have the researching skills and sometimes the access that you use in your day-to-day job. And I thought, you know, let's put this to use and write a book.
So, in addition to what you have mentioned thus far, what is there any other vision and goal for this book?
Maybe a movie in which Brad Pitt plays me. No, it's a book that I think I'll update in a couple of years' time, maybe 5 to 10 years. Maybe there's something that changes, but I'm very happy with how the book was received and how the book did. You know, obviously not everyone is enamored with the book, not everyone likes it, you know, not every review is a good review, but the book was read, and I'm very happy that we managed to put together something which I think is accessible, which is easy to read, and which is a fun read, even though you might not agree with everything in it. But no real different plans. We'll maybe update it in 5 to 10 years' time.
Yeah, so the purpose was achieved. You wrote the book was made available, and the book was read.
Exactly, and that's what you want. As an author, you just want people to read your terrible prose.
Yeah. So, being a journalist first, can you take us through the journey of writing this book from what you can recall? I understand it was only published in 2019, so you might have difficulty in recalling some of the events. But what have you learned before, during, and after writing this book?
Discipline with writing is the most important thing, and it's much like studying. You need to sit your ass down in front of the computer. You know, it's about hard work. It's you know, there is this romantic idea that when you write a book, that creativity and inspiration just flows from your fingers into the keyboard or from your pen, and that's certainly not the case. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of research. It's about being disciplined. It's about being diligent. And then only once you've done the research, then you can start thinking about the writing process. And the writing process is a lonely process. It's something that takes extremely long, obviously. But you've got a whole team working with you. I had a wonderful editor that worked with me that made the copy and the writing so much better. But it's certainly a hard job, and it takes a while to recover from that. What I remember very well is, you know, cold winters evenings when everyone's asleep in your house, and after you've done a hard day's work, where you sit down at the desk, you know, in the dead of night and just keep on writing, even though you might think that what you've just taken 4 hours to write is terrible, is crap. You know, you need to get words down on paper. Once you've got 70 or 75 or 80,000 words down on paper, then you can start working with a text. So it's you know, it's much like journalism. It's research, it's writing, and of course it's creative writing, because you want people to read what you write. So it needs to be well written as well. It doesn't just help that you spew 70,000 or 80,000 words. It needs to be enjoyable and readable. So that's certainly something that I'll never forget. Those long, lonely winter's nights.
And word after word, that shows much progress, no matter how small it might seem, but that's progress. You wrote
Absolutely.
a word after a word.
Exactly. It's just I've always had this image in my mind when I write and I'm struggling. It's, you know, I imagine myself being a green John Deere tractor in first gear. You know, it goes very slowly, but at least it moves forward, and that's all you want.
I can imagine also the masters and the doctoral students or other candidates can relate right
Absolutely.
now.
I'm sure.
So, are there any sections that are associated with your down or happy moments in the book?
I think they were all equal measure. Some were down, some were up. Look, it's as far as the writing process is concerned, it's look, it's not easy. It's painful. I mean, you know, I remember, you know, I've got a young family, so they went on weekends away, and then you sit alone watching or writing and staring at your computer screen. So that's painful. But a pleasurable moment is when you finish your first draft. You know, when you finish that first consolidated Word document and you can send it off to the publisher, and then you take a breather. But then the real work also starts, because it comes back from the editor with a lot of red marks, and then you have to work through possible improvements to the text, you know, and you don't always agree with it, but I think it came out for the better after the hard work that the editor did. So it's look, it's an enormously rewarding process writing a book, and there's nothing quite like walking into an exclusive books and seeing your book on a shelf, and seeing someone paging through it. You know, then you just want to walk over and say, look, you can buy it. It's a good book, I promise. So the book was an absolute pleasure to do, by and large, to be quite honest.
That's great to hear. So what was the highlight of the Stellenbosch Mafia writing journey?
Definitely the moment I was at my office at News 24, and a courier delivered my author's copies, delivered 6 author's copies, and, you know, fresh from the printing press. So that's a definite highlight. But also another highlight is when your publisher just sends you a note saying, we've gone to the printers today. You know, then it's done. Then you can't change anything. You know, the lawyers have checked it. People who are going to be angry, you know, they're going to be angry, but that's just how it is. And once they press that button at the printing press in Cape Town where it was printed, there's no going back. And that's also a wonderful highlight.
So do you remember yourself at that moment, like the emotions at that time? Can you put it into words?
Obviously, it's a sense of relief, but it's also a sense of achievement. You know, I'm quite an average journalist. I'd never thought that I would have written a book, and to be part of a wonderful publishing house. I'm contracted to Jonathan Wall Publishers. It's such a privilege working with professionals who really go out of their way to make sure that your book is available everywhere. So it's you know, to put it into words, once you get the book, it's a sense of achievement. Obviously, you're very proud, but also relieved that it finally has been published. But also anxiousness, because, you know, you think, shit, I could have done this better, I could have done that better, or I missed a trick there, or, you know, look how terrible this was written. But, you know, that's how it is. You try your best in the moment, but certainly a sense of relief and of achievement.
Most definitely. What's done is done, no more turning back.
Exactly. You know, the die is cast. There we go. There's nothing I can do anymore.
So did you have any fears when you were writing this book?
No, not really. Look, there are fears when you publish the book and writing the book and publish the book that you know, you might burn bridges, you might you know, alienate people, and that certainly did happen, unfortunately. But to be able to communicate a story like this to, you know, thousands and thousands of people who spent their rands on this book is such an immense privilege. And you know, this has now become the reference work about Stellenbosch and about the Stellenbosch Mafia, and that's a wonderful privilege, and that's a wonderful thing that I'm so lucky to be able to have done, thanks to the wonderful publishers I work with. So wasn't scared, obviously apprehension, you know, seeing your name on the cover of the book at the airport, exclusive books at Joburg, you know, that is daunting, but very cool to be honest.
So will you change anything in the book given the opportunity?
No, I wouldn't. I will, you know, you can always improve the writing. You know, you can always improve on the research. You know, you can delve into certain topics a little bit deeper, I think. So apart from normal improvements, there's not a lot. I think there's nothing that I would not have published. Put it that way. There's nothing that I would have left out. You know, if I was able to write full time because I'm a working journalist, you know, the book might have looked different. But look, Sabu, I remain very proud of the book, and I'm very lucky that that the book was published. You know, you can always write better, but writing is a lifelong journey. I think writing is something that you learn every single day, and certainly journalism is one of those professions that, you know, once you think you've got it figured out, you know, it bites you up the ass, and it trips you up. So the moment you think that you know all the tricks of the trade, then it tends to catch you out. So you know, I think in journalism, as with writing books, you need to remain humble, because you get knocked off your perch very easily.
And on the other hand, being a journalist assisted you a lot, as you have mentioned, because if you were solely a book writer, we don't know how things would have turned out. Maybe the research wouldn't be so enormous.
Exactly. Look, the journalism obviously helped. You know, as a journalist, it's part of your everyday work, obviously in a much more condensed time period. But, you know, research, checking facts, speaking to people, and writing and producing that, you do that in the course of 24 hours every single day. So that certainly helped me, and I'm glad for that. Happy that I had that background. Next time, I think I'll improve on my processes, I think.
So can we expect the second edition of the very same book?
Look, there's a project in the works, and I'll keep you posted on that. But there's a similar project in the works with Jonathan Ball Publishers, and we hope to get that on the shelves next year.
Oh, so it's 2022, guys. You've heard it. 2022, look out.
Exactly.
Shelves. Okay, so the first publication was red, yellow. So any idea?
Maybe
orange.
Maybe ANC green, black, and yellow. You know, you never know.
Yeah, you never know. So guys, we're crossing fingers, ne? Crossing fingers for you. So do you relate to and with any of the book characters? You mentioned that you know some of them. So do you relate with or to them in any way?
That's a good question. You know, not on a personal level. You know, I won't say I'm friends with any of them. But given my background as white Afrikaans, you know, I went to the same school as some of them and attended the same university. So you do have similar socialization. You know, and you are pretty much brought up in the same milieu. You're brought up in the same environment. So in that sense, they are different. You know, I can relate to them. I can probably relate to the way that they think, and probably relate to the way that they process history. But you know, am I friends with any of them? No. Am I close to any of them? No. Have I worked with or for any of them? No. It's purely a matter of chance that I was able to write about them, given that I understand the environment, understand the culture, understand the history. I wanted to bring that to a wider audience, specifically a Black audience.
Oh, so what are their thoughts on the book?
No, they don't like it. No, I don't think that any of them liked the book. I know for a fact Johan Rupert does not like the book, which is a pity. I maintained a very cordial relationship with him for many years, and I was quite disappointed in the way that he responded to the book, given that he knew what I was working on, and I spent some time in his house, talking to him about the country, about history, about all manner of things. So no, they don't like the book. Stellenbosch people generally detest the book.
So do you still go to Stellenbosch?
I do. It's a town that's very close to my heart. I often go back for reunions and visiting friends and going to watch sport and such. So I'd still go back. The first couple of months was tough. People did indicate their displeasure with me, if I can put it lightly.
Yeah.
But I do go back, yes.
Oh, okay. No. At least you are still able to. So this not being your first product, how did you feel when you completed writing this book in particular, like right at the end, closed?
It was the first book that I wrote on my own, so that was daunting and very satisfying. Obviously, as I said earlier, a little bit apprehensive. You know, when you put something down on paper, it's literally something of you that you give to the whole world to see and to read. And you know, if they reject that, you know, everyone has a fear of rejection. Even the most hard-nosed among us have a fear of rejection. So you do have that fear. But obviously very relieved that it was done. Halfway through the writing of the book, I did have a wobbly at one stage where I thought, look, let's cancel this book. I don't want to do it anymore. But the publisher insisted and bought me lots of wine. And in the end, you know, we finished it. And so a sense of relief is the very first emotion that you get.
Okay, so would you replicate the methodology of this book in another African country or continent?
I would. I'm in fact doing it now. You know, looking at another interesting sociological subset of South African society and politics. But you know, as with every project, you improve on your methodology and you improve on your process. And you improve on your methods of research and gathering information. It's obviously difficult when you do have a full-time job as a journalist. Because I think if you are able to write full-time, the product will obviously be so much better. But it is what it is. And you know, journalism and writing books, they feed off each other. So I think it worked out well.
So as you have worked on 3 successfully published books, what would you say are your word building techniques?
Building techniques.
Yeah, the word, like how have you improved on your writing? What did you do to improve on your grammar or the content?
It's reading. I mean, that's the only way. I read quite a lot. I do have a number of favorite journalists that I follow to death. And I read by emulating. You know, I improve by emulating, and I improve by reading. You know, reading the book now, there are some paragraphs and passages where I cringe, where I think, oh my word, I've written it like that. You know, but that's how writing works. The only way in which you can improve writing is about doing it, is by doing it and practicing it and reading and emulating and reading and following what the great writers do. That's the only way. Look, I'm not a native English speaker. My mother tongue is Afrikaans. And like, you know, if you're Sotho or Tswana, you know, you think in your mother tongue often. But when you start working in English, you know, that along the way it changes. You know, you start arguing in English and you start, you know, doing stuff in English, which is just how the world works these days. But it's about reading. You know, that's the only thing that you can do to improve writing. You know, and I've got a number of journalists that I follow and whose work I follow closely. And you know, you need to find your own style. Your own voice is unique as well, and it doesn't help that you 100% emulate someone else. But you need to look at the masters. And there's a whole wealth of wonderful writers out there that, you know, that anyone can read.
So referring to writing a book as an author and also with journalism, your first day-to-day job, what are your plotting maneuvers when it comes to writing?
So you know, planning is planning a book. You need to sit. I mean, when you start planning a book, you need to know what you want to achieve. You know, you need to write towards something. What are you setting out to achieve with this story? And when I wrote Stellenbosch Mafia, when I wrote my first book, about state capture with Adrian, my colleague. You know, it was an easy book to write because there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, we started it at Polokwane, where Jacob Zuma defeated Thabo Mbeki. You know, we went through the state capture years, and we ended it at the ANC's 2017 Nazareth conference. So there was a narrative arc, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in Stellenbosch Mafia, you know, there wasn't a narrative arc. There wasn't a storyline or a beginning, middle, and an end. So I had to get my planning right. With the current book I'm doing, I've got a big white sketch pad where I plot the book. So, you know, I try to first up, I try to put down on paper a framework or a skeleton of how I think the book's structure should look. And then I try to flesh out the different sub topics or chapters. Then I try and identify what do I need to complete those stories and chapters, and who do I need to interview, and what research do I need to get done. So I suppose it's much like an academic piece of work, but it changes. You know, it's a dynamic process. Once you start writing, something that you think might fit in well here, you know, actually moves to the front or moves to the back. So you need to have planning. You need to know exactly, I think, who you want to speak to, but you then also need to be agile enough to move things around. Move components around, because once the writing process starts, I think your brain also changes. Synapses fire differently. And you think, you know, this might actually fit in better here, and this might not work, and you know, you might drop a chapter altogether. So I don't know if that makes sense, but you need to sit down and plot something. Look, writing a book is not any romantic enterprise where you sit in front of a computer and words just flow out. That's just not how it works. You need to plan, and you need to sit, and often there are dark and quiet hours where you know, you write 50 words in an hour. And then there are other periods of time where you write 1,000 words in an hour. So it changes all the time.
So you should have the sense of adapting and also being versatile in a way, and also think out of the box from time to time.
Yes, you do. You must. Look, it remains a creative process. It's not a dogmatic process. You have to have some dogmatism involved, otherwise you won't finish the book. But it remains a creative process. It remains a creative process in the quality of writing or creative writing. It remains creative in the way in which you present arguments or in who you interview. And it's a creative process when you start packaging the book and, you know, creating the cover. So even though there is planning and dogmatism involved, it does remain creative.
Yeah, I hope that will be useful in the other people who are looking at you right now and be like, wow, I want to be that man. And how were you able to become a bestseller?
Look, a combination of luck and fortune and a very good marketing team at Jonathan Ball. Look, it's about timing. It's about timing. The book was published at the right time. And look, I'm not a particularly good writer, but I try. It's, you know, if you want to become a best-selling author, you need to have a very deep interest in your environment, in your country, in your people, in the country's history. And you want, you know, every one of us likes watching a nice movie or a nice series on Netflix. You know, if you like telling stories, you know, then you should try writing them down.
Yeah. And how would you encourage aspiring authors to chase their dream as writers?
Read. You know? Writing comes from reading. I do believe writing comes from reading. If you want to write, you need to read 100 times more than you write. That's the only way in which you'll be competent enough to write. Not that I am, but I think the only way in which you'll be able to get people to read what you write. So you need, if you want to become a good author, a good writer, you know, read. That's all it is. And writing is it takes discipline. It takes doing. You know, you need to practice as much writing as you can. So read as much as you can, and then write for about 1/10 of that. So for every 1,000 words you write, you need to read 10,000 words.
More. Now we get you, guys. Did you hear? Did you hear that? You must read, read, and read. So, how do we get hold of your work? How do we contact you for anyone who would want to like advise or want to know more about your work?
Look, welcome to send me an email. My email address is pdutoit@24.com. That's PDUTOIT@24.com. That's 24.com. I work for News 24. I'm on Twitter as well under my name, Peter du Toit. So drop me a message there, and I'd be happy to chat to anyone who wants to talk about books and writing.
Oh, thank you, guys. Please make use of this man. He's offering your assistance to you. Please reach out. His sounds are like the best, one of the best.
Happy to do it, Sabu. Happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you once again from the Central University of Technology, University of the Free State, and the Sol Plaatje University. We are hoping to be with you again in our second annual book fair, which should be next year. Do you not have anything more to add?
I'm so glad that you guys are doing this. I do think that our whole future and the future of our youth and our children depends on reading, not screens. So reading. So I'm so glad that you guys are doing this. All the best with your project, and I hope that you get enormous support.
Thank you. So you surely will spread the word out there.
Absolutely, will do.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Okay, Sabu. Keep well.
Have a lovely day further.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing experience to be immersed in such a discussion. Now, what follows next is the panel discussion by Ms. Boo and Dr. Modise. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you, colleague Chair and Ms. Boo for leading us in that discussion. I think the way forward, it will be question, comments from your side. You can put your question, your comments on the chat box, and you'll also forward your comments in a question to the author of the book. And well done, Boo, and congratulations for doing that.
Thank you.
We have observed a number of comments from our colleagues on the chat box. I saw the comment from Esther, from Moses, and also from a number of colleagues there. Zuku, also your comment. Mondi, your comment. And thank you so much for that comment. Zbu, I don't know from your side, do you have anything comment? Because of time, we'll take your comment to the author of the book, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I see that you posted the comments on the chat section, but looking at them, I'm not sure if, I'm not sure if you guys, colleagues, were answered. Some of your comments and questions were covered during the discussion. So if you still have an outstanding query, you can always forward to Mr. Peter du Toit. And unfortunately, we are running behind schedule, but if we had more time, we would have permitted the discussion on the book for anyone that have read the book. But due to time, we will be unable to share our views on the book.
Agreed. Agreed, Ms. Boo. Thank you very much.
Thank
yes.
you.
Yeah. Once more, colleagues, can somebody mute? Thank you very much. Once more, colleagues, this was just a breathtaking experience, of being immersed in such a book that, took the country by storm. Everybody was raving about the book. Fortunately, today it was our turn as the Free Staters, those who missed that first opportunity to meet the author. So we saw the author and we listened to him, what inspired him to write the book and the experiences he went through, you know, the resentment in other quarters and the appreciation in other quarters. So, and also the motivation and inspiration for others to write. And, you know, also letting people know that, let me switch on my camera. Yes, and also letting people know that, you know, it's doable. People can write, and the more people write, the more the country will be inspired. And I also like the fact that Peter mentioned that people must read. He wrote because he just reads, you know, he just reads. So really, this is just a good platform for us as the CEN Free Sol institutions. You know, we are getting more inspired to do better in the upcoming book fair in 2022. Right, now we are going to move over to our next panel discussion. The next panel discussion is the theme is repatriation of linguistically exiled letters. So the facilitator is going to be Dr. Richard Molwele. He's from the Sol Plaatje University. And then we have Professor Scholl. I don't know if it's Scholle or Scholl. Scholle or Scholl, Ms. Lerato Trok, and Ms. Tuelo Gabonewe. Those are the panelists. But before we give the panelists the opportunity to discuss the book, let us go to the clip, the presentation of the book, and then we will engage with the panelists thereafter. Over to you, organizing team. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Janet, there's no clip for this book. It was gonna be live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. So, yeah. Over to the panelists, Mr. Sabata Mugai and Professor Jesmail Mataga, I hope I said it correctly, are the authors of this book. And so it's up to the authors to take us through the book, what inspired them to write the book, and especially in the time and history that we live in, you know, we want to hear, because now in the past, this knowledge was not there, but now recently it is coming up to the forth, you know, where we are being, you know, shown that, you know, this is what has happened. Now repatriation of letters, you know, the rehoming of exiled works, of exiled African literature. I mean, it's a big thing. I mean, it's something that, you know, should be applauded, you know, at the mountaintops to say, hey, there is something. Now you can see that we have always been described as a oral people, but now Africans are writing as well, and are documenting what they have experienced. So I'm going to give over to Mr. Sabata Mugai and Professor Jesmail Mataga at SPU to take us through the book. Thank you very much.
Good morning, colleagues. I think Dr. Richard Molwele is the moderator of this panel.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks, Sabata. Thanks, Sabata. Ladies and gentlemen, it is such a great honor that we are gathered here today on this platform to promote the culture of reading. A lot has been said by previous speakers in concernment with the issues of books, issues of reading, and we are also going to say something about the books. I'm going to facilitate this slot on repatriation of linguistically exiled letters. And we will run the slot in this way. First, it would be Mr. Sabata Mugai, who will give us the bird's eye view about the project. Then allow Tuelo Gabonewe, Lerato Trok, as well as Professor Scholle, to beef up and fill the gaps. Let me also declare, ladies and gentlemen, that Udate Sabata Mugai will be recused immediately after making his presentation of about 10 minutes. he would be recused, as he's not very well. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to favor you with Mr. Sabata Mokai's short profile. I'm doing that because Sabata is the man behind this project that we are going to be talking about. Sabata Mokai is an academic, a novelist, and a translator. He teaches creative writing in African languages at Solplaki University. He has written the biography of Solplaki, and over and above this, he authored Setswana novels, Hakimudisa, Pikeledi, and Letwamano. He has translated 2 children's books by Trina Mhlope from English to Setswana, and he co-edited with Brian Whelan, of course, 2 books. The first one, Solplaki's Muhudi. The second one, Solplaki, Life in Letters, that was done in 2020. He has won a number of awards, to just mention a few. Mnet Literary Award for the best Setswana novel in 2030. And furthermore, he was awarded a South African Literary Award. That's a lot that we can say about this. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, allow me, fellow colleagues, to give a platform to Ndabisi Sabata Mokai, who would speak. And immediately thereafter, we ask him to go because he's not well. And we would remain with Professor Shole, a torchbearer. Professor Shole is a torchbearer because he always guides us, take us, and we follow him all the time. Professor Shole would remain, Rato Trok would also remain with us, and Tuelo Havnewi will be in the panel, just to give us an idea of what is happening with the repatriation of letters. Because the project was started due to the fact that there is shortage of books, and yet there are so many books that have been written. Books have been written, but they have been written by Black people, and they were written in English. When writers write, they write in another language. They don't write it for some reasons. Maybe we will get the reasons why that is the case. So it is against this background that books, novels in particular, are being transcreated by the team headed by the team of authors. They've been moved from English now. They crossed the fence. They are in Setswana. They will tell us more. Ndabisi Sabata Mokai, let me afford you this opportunity to give us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Richard Molwele, and thank you to colleagues who are joining us. The repatriation of letters it's what one would call some literary revolution. I'll take you back to a conference of African writers of English expression that took place on the 1st of June at the University of Makerere in Uganda, in Kampala, Uganda. The conference, the first thing, the name of the conference excluded African writers who were writing in mother tongue. And this was a huge conference, big conference in the Anglophone Africa. And what that conference did was to put a stamp of approval on the idea that if it is not in a European language, it is not literature, which means that a person like Thomas Mofolo, who gave us one of the first, if not really the first, African language novel, Moetu wa Bochabela, in 1907 in Lesotho, if he were to ask to attend that conference, he would not be allowed to attend that conference on the basis that he wrote in Sesotho. Now, what that conference also did was to create this framework of what African literature is. And then we started having a lot of attempts by African writers to tame the English language, twist it and make it their own. And hence we now speak of Englishes. But also in the process, we saw the slow death of African language literature. You go to schools and universities today, you look at books that are read. So many of them are very old. Books that were produced in the 1970s, in the 1980s, are still used to teach in class today. And this is because the pool is so little. And so we thought that we need to do something. One, it's not easy to find enough people to encourage to write in mother tongue. A lot of people were educated in English, and as a result, it becomes an easier way of expressing yourself as a writer. But we also have the privilege of living in a multilingual society. We have studied languages. South Africa, with its troubled history, one of the things that was not taken away from us was our languages. People have been taught in isiZulu, in Sesotho, in Setswana, and so on in the past. And people have been able to produce literature in those languages. However, that literature was not enough. Now, the repatriation of letters project came out of the idea that was firstly, or an argument that was firstly made by now Professor Ratius Melato-Malope in the 1970s at the University of the North, where he argued that this novel by Sol Plaatje, Mohudi, which was the first novel in English to be written by a Black South African, he made an argument that Mohudi was essentially a Setswana novel, not really an English novel. And then later on, we had my colleague who is a fellow panelist here, Professor Shole Shole, together with Dr. Eileen Powe, who went further to actually advocate for the return of Mohudi to its linguistic base. Hence, we are using the word repatriation. Repatriation and translation differ in the sense that in translation, I could take Mohudi, written in English, and translate it into French. That is translation. But in repatriation, firstly, I acknowledge that the author of Mohudi was Setswana speaking. And secondly, that he wrote in a language that was not his. And if I were to quote Shole Shole and Eileen Powe in the case they made for the repatriation of Mohudi back to Setswana, they were saying, Mohudi is a novel by a patriotic Motswana, which has as its subject his Botswana people and their Setswana world. It is inspired by and owes its being to the Setswana setting, history, and socio-cultural world. Now, you listen to that argument, it tells you that the story in Mohudi could not have been conceptualized in English, when the author himself had already, at the time when he wrote Mohudi in 1920, he had already translated Shakespeare's plays into Setswana, 2 plays, in Chunchus Abu Julius Kesara, which was Julius Caesar, and the Posho Posho, which was the Comedy of Errors. But he took a decision to write a novel in English for reasons that he gave. The first reason was that he wanted to let the world know how an African thinks. He spoke about the back of the native mind. Secondly, he said he was hoping that through the sales of this book, he would be able to get money to produce more books in Setswana. Now, also, one person who has been advocating for African language literature is Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who wrote in his well-known book, Decolonizing the Mind, The Politics of Language in African Literature, about the future of African literature. He said, the future of the African novel, and let us say also of African poetry, plays, and so on, is then dependent on a willing writer ready to invest time and talent in African languages, a willing translator ready to invest time and talent in the art of translating from one African language to another, a willing publisher ready to invest time and money, or a progressive state which would overhaul the current new colonial linguistic policies. Now, inspired by these arguments, we then looked for books that were written in English by Setswana-speaking authors. We read these books, and we could tell that the author of this book is Setswana-speaking. You can tell Muhudi itself does not have a single English-speaking character in it. You can tell when you're reading Martin Kobeka's Taung Wells, the story beautifully written, set in the beautiful village in Taung, that this is a Setswana book, and that the translation back to the author's own language would actually liberate him further. You read Call Me Woman by Ellen Kuzwayo, the story that begins in Tabancho, and you realize that translating this back to Ellen Kuzwayo's own language is repatriation. And so that is how the repatriation of letters started. We have Kagiso Molopez, This Book Betrays My Brother, is a novel. Sarcophagus by Tuelo Gabonewe, which has been translated now into Setswana, is Tika Faya Baneng, Call Me Woman by Ellen Kuzwayo. We also have Matters of Life and Death by Lesego Malepe. We have Muhudi by Sol Plaatje. And among the translators, we have Dr. Richard Molwele, who is about to finish with the translation of Call Me Woman, repatriating it into the author's own language. Tuelo Gabonewe has translated his own work, Tika Faya Baneng, and Lorato Trok has translated This Book Betrays My Brother, not really translated by, repatriated it, and Palesa Seleke is busy with repatriating Sol Plaatje's Muhudi. We started, our first meeting was in 2017 or 2018, and we launched the first fruit in this project about a week or two ago, which is Tika Faya Baneng by Tuelo Gabonewe. And we hope that few things will come out of this. One is that a pool of Setswana novels will be bigger. Through Repatriation of Letters project, this first phase, and we are hoping for more phases, we are adding 7 new novels in that pool. That is the first thing. The second thing is that we know that languages that are not written, read, and used die naturally. And therefore, by writing, you give the language oxygen. You also give this language an opportunity to develop, because you develop new terminology where there is none. You create new words where other words do not, where some words do not exist. You borrow from other languages to grow your language, because borrowing is really, it's normal. English as it is, the late Professor Kurapetso Kgostile used to say, English is nothing but a sophisticated fanakalo, because there are so many languages making English what it is. And we're hoping that through repatriation of letters, we will also borrow from other languages and create new terms so that our language is growing. And we are also hoping that it will be emulated by other universities that are focusing on other languages. At Sol Plaatje University, the main language that is targeted by the repatriation at the moment is Setswana, and we're hoping that our colleagues in the Free State will do that with Sesotho, will look for English work written by Sesotho-speaking writers and repatriate it to its linguistic base, which is Sesotho. I hope, Dr. Molwele, that I have done justice to what you asked me to do, sir.
Thanks so much, Dr. Mukai. You've made it. You've nailed it on its head. Thanks so much. You've given us the background why you've started with the repatriation of letters, and now our colleagues at Central University, our colleagues at University of the Free State, and our colleagues here who know why we are in this project where we are repatriating the letters from English to Setswana. We have in our midst, ladies and gentlemen, a torchbearer in the name of Professor Shole. We will allow him some time before I call Melorato Trok le Rep to brief and fill some gaps and answer a few questions. That Shole, Prof. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Molwele, and thanks to Sabata Mukai, the main man. I think he has put it so well. I have little that I can add to, and thanks to everybody. Now, if you allow me, from my perspective, I would like to give a little philosophical and historical background to this project. And that will be mostly from a personal involvement. This is about repatriation, a form of cultural repatriation, and about translation, basically. And I first used translation for cultural repatriation at the launch of the translation of Zygmunda's dramas 20 years ago. And I felt, translating Zygmunda is not like translating Shakespeare, because Mda's works should have been written in Sesotho or in Xhosa in the first place. And by being written in English, they are moved from their home base to a foreign English world. And somewhere I said they are vestiges of imperial conquer, and to put them back in their mother languages is returning them to their home base, the African language communities that they are about, as Sabata has said. We are repatriating them from a linguistic exile, which is another concept that I introduced. Now, and then I presented a paper in Mafeking and in Kimberley and coined the word for a repatriative form of translation, Petzolelo, which is also a wordplay on Petolelo, which led to the project repatriation of letters, for which we have already launched the first product, as he has already mentioned, the transcreation of Tuelo sarcophagus into Tshikafaya by the author himself. And I know now the book Tshikafaya is already prescribed for Sol Plaatje students. Now, the point is whether African language speakers are not creative. Sabata mentioned the decline in writing, and whether the African languages are not suitable for literary expression. Now, you have, of course, African writing, but they are writing in English, and African literature written in English is exiled into, it's like exiled into European culture. And we are referring now to European languages that are former colonial languages of our former imperialists. And to transcreate them, to repatriate them, these works by African writers, is to reclaim, to re-nativize them, to reimagine them in the native languages of the authors, of the African authors, and their African language communities. So, Petsulelo is a repatriative translation, which later we said repatriative transcreation. And it's not just, to add works in African languages or to transfer what was written in English into an African language. It's not just an artistic project. It's a revolutionary political act. It's an intervention, because translation, of course, is interventionist. It comes between two situations. Firstly, it disrupts this environment where the hegemonious European languages predominate unfairly and stifle native language creativity for reasons some people will cite. And it liberates the artistic works from a foreign language, and it disrupts this colonization project. It decolonizes, and by as Ngugi would say, when you are a patriotic African writer, you will think of your people and your culture and your development first. So patriotic writers like Plaiki, like Ngugi, like Zig